Hello there. Review of recap of session 33 of Castles and Crusades campaign. I had 6 players for this session. It was a big session. We had because of the last session where not everybody we didn't finish the session, like it's still ongoing. Those characters are kind of tied up, so we had to bring in some alternate characters. We had a return of the gnome illusionist rogue, uh, two clan. My boy was home from college visiting, so we had a return of Lork, half orc ranger. Uh, One of our other players, Zach, he is an alternate character. He started as a wizard, a human wizard named Unax, and Patry, who's a ranger druid. Pounder, the half ogre barbarian, and my buddy Chris was brought in a new character, a human barbarian named Jorg. So we started off the session with a little bit of what's been going on around Iredale Stronghold, and that kind of centered on Lork as the captain of and leader of the Wolves of Arden and the chieftain's shieldman. He's been hunting down bugbears, and he's pretty much driven them all from. He's either killed them or driven them from the around the stronghold and the thornwood forest that surrounds it. So there's pretty much no bugbear threat there. But he's very driven, and he wants to. And this is some stuff that my son and I discussed outside of the game. That he really wants to go after the war chief, the war tribe chieftain Bolg, the one that killed Regan Scrandon, and he really wants to do that. He just hasn't been able to, so it's been kind of burning him up a little bit. To introduce Chris's new character, Jorg, he has a background. He's from further north, from area that none of the other characters are from or have been to, and he has had some run-ins with the Redcaps and them savaging the hunting lands, killing stags and stuff like that, which is what came up in the last session as kind of a little side encounter that they found a slaughter site. So, and Lork has also found many of these slaughter sites while he's been hunting. Him and the Wolves of Arden have been hunting bugbears. So he's also very interested in that because he's had personal run-ins with Redcaps on a couple of occasions. So he's familiar with them. He ends up assembling a team of the other characters. We jokingly referred to them as the B team after a while, because there was a lot of comedy in this session with between the characters and stuff. So they instantly became the B team that Lork is used to working with. He had sent some of his scouts out, members of the Wolves, and they've tracked the Redcaps to the outside of the Thornwood Forest. It joins another forest that surrounds this town that's on the large lake in this setting, and this town is under like a cloud of mystery. The forest around it is completely blighted. About 175 years ago, this mist surrounded it, and like nobody goes there, nobody comes out of there. During the Dragon Wars, which happened about 150 years ago, there was actually an element of a unit of Eldani soldiers who were invaders from the north, went into the mist, into that town to claim it, and they were never seen again. So nobody goes there. So these tracks lead into the forest that surrounds that area. So they, like good adventurers, Lork leads his B team on this trail and on this path, and they track into this blighted wilderness. It's relatively uneventful. There was some resting camp nights, and we made some rolls, but nothing came up with random encounters. They did come across this very large. They followed the path. The path was easy to follow. One of the things they also noted about the path was it was dozens of redcaps, but there was also a very large stag that was being led by the Redcaps. And Lork, because he's a ranger, a higher level ranger, well, fairly high level ranger for the campaign. He's the highest level character, 6th level. He was able to determine that it was being led, and now it's all been wounded. So they come across, they start on this, they're on this trail, and then they start seeing all these totems hanging from the trees. They're made of like bones and twigs and other stuff, kind of like Blair Witch like, if you've ever seen that. And it leads up to this large tree, this very large tree, old tree. And this thing's covered in those things, which they were like, that's kind of weird. And the other thing they note as they're looking around, I think it was Lork, saw this large raven sitting, not in that tree, but in another tree, watching it. And he's familiar with that because they had met a woman who had the form of a raven, Ravlunda, many sessions ago. And sure enough, she flies down, goes down behind the tree, and when she comes out the other side, she appears as the woman Ravlunda. And she tells them that basically that they're headed towards a great evil. They need to be cautious. She's not sure exactly what it is, but like they need to be cautious. She actually, in the party, other than Lork, none of them, I don't think any of them had met her. I think Lork was the only one that had met her. So they're suspicious, especially Jorg. He's very suspicious of that stuff, being a barbarian. Pounder, the half-ogre barbarian, he just hands her a flower in greeting, which she accepts and tucks into her braid. But yeah, so she ends up providing them with a little bit. She gives them all potions to help them, and they're basically potions of Shield of Faith. So they take her warning, and they continue on. Eventually, coming to this old, like, basically maybe an old temple. They're not quite sure what it is, the structure, but the ground has gotten a little more swampy, and it looks like the ground is coming up to swallow it. Like on one side, it's just these rock formations that come up out of the ground, and the other side is covered in vines and moss, and there's trees, and but they're able to make it. There's an entrance at the beginning in the front. They cross a small bridge, and they enter this structure, which is what you see before you. They go in. There's doors to the front and to the left and right. They go to they actually split. So they have a group that goes to the left and a group that goes to the right. Although on the right side, they kind of hold the door and they listen. On the left, they can hear creaking and then low moaning. So they're kind of like, uh-oh, that's not good. And none of this terrain is revealed at that point. Like, it's just describing it, so they haven't really seen it yet. And on the right side, they can just hear the creaking. So they end up going in on the left, and there's this tree that's growing up out of the floor, this blighted tree, and hanging from it is a cage. And in it is, turns out to be a woman. And she's wearing a ragged dress. She's got long, crazy gray hair that hides her features. And she's all huddled up and she's very small and frail, and she's huddled up in this cage, and she's just rocking and moaning. And they talk to her, and when she reaches out, like Pounder's actually surprisingly gentle with her, and they're trying to get her to coax her to come out. When she reaches out to take one of their hands, they notice that from the elbow down ends up being on both of her arms. She's been completely degloved, like she has no skin from elbow to fingertip on either hand, and her hand is. Her arms in those areas, as the players described, look like beef jerky. So they do some things to try to heal her, but the wounds are so old that they don't really heal, like the skin doesn't grow back. The other thing they note about her is she's missing an eye, and her socket's all grown in. And they talk to her a little bit, and she's crazy. Like, she's just, she has the mind of a young, a 13-year-old, and she's just crazy. But they do get out of her that she is from a place called Loch Moran, and that means nothing to the players, to the characters, but that meant something to 3 of the players, because Loch Moran is a location in another campaign that I ran in my setting, totally different continent. It was a town that their characters, these three players, their characters were kind of operated out of. Like they spent a lot of time there. They were very familiar with it. So those players are like, oh, what? Whoa, what's going on? So, which was neat because there was a big reveal at the end, which we'll get to. So they end up trying to help her. And then the other part of the party, they go to the other side, to the right, and they go in there. And then similarly, there's a tree growing up out of the ground. There's a cage hanging out of it. In there, though, they find a battered and bruised faux fire, who's the Fey Knight of the Fey realm that Lork has met several times. He helped them defeat, early on in the campaign, faux fire helped them defeat the Goblin King in the mines. So he warns them because and I'll do a run through of the terrain afterwards, but there's a hole in the wall in the chamber he's in, and he points to that, and he just motions for them to be quiet. So they stealthily get him out of the cage, which didn't happen on the other side. Pounder broke the lock, and he booted in the door because both the doors were locked and trapped, which Two Clan was able to disable the traps. He took all the time to grease the hinges so they could open it silently, and then maybe the lock attempt failed, or just Pounder decided to go up and he booted the door, which really negated the whole greasing, which was funny we all thought that was pretty funny, typical of a half ogre barbarian. But anyway, so they're able to quietly free Faux Fire, and he tells them that he has come on the behalf of his king, King Oberon, that he has come seeking the white stag, and that there is a hag that is hunting the stag, and her name is Auntie Agatha Ironteeth. And he got captured by the Redcaps and imprisoned, but he hasn't been here very long. He's beaten up, stripped of his equipment and stuff, but he hasn't been a prisoner very, very long. So they scout ahead a little bit, the hole in the wall, and they see these big ogres, these long-limbed, gangly ogres, and they end up attacking them. It's a relatively quick fight. There's 3 of them in there. They're joined by 2 others. One is larger than the rest. But they get through that pretty good. They take some lumps. A few of them take some lumps. I think Pounder took a few hits. Maybe Lork did, but Lork has a ridiculous armor class, so he might not have taken too many hits. But they get through that. There's some attempts from Two Clan, because he's a rogue, to get in some sneak attacks, which I don't know if he did. I think he failed. Like, he was able to hide, but like his attack rolls kind of failed him, which is a theme we're seeing, because the same thing happens to Cosmo when he tries to back attack. He'll get there and hide all right, but when it comes time to actually hit with a melee weapon, he fails his roll. But anyway, they clear that out, find a little bit of treasure, not much, and then move on. They decide at this time that, or maybe it was probably around this time, that Umax is going to stay, because they weren't sure what to do with the woman. Her name was Venda, and they weren't sure what to do with her, so Unax decides to stay with her. Part of that was a meta reason, because Zach had to leave a little bit early, so he was on his way out, so he did that with his character. He actually suggested it, which was a great idea. So the rest of the party moves up through this tunnel, comes into this cave, and they see out here, this is dimly lit. This main area is dimly lit, and they can see a cage with a white stag in it, and they see a bunch of redcaps, and then they see all these trees, and from the trees, there's cages, almost in all of them. And in all of the cages, there's children, young children. So they're like, oh crap, we gotta rescue them. They're local kids from Arden. And I think Lork led the attack with, either a fumble on an athletics or a roll, but he ends up falling out of that cage and landing in the pool below, out of the cave entrance. Lands in the pool below, and the Redcaps converge on him. The rest of the party just rushes in to try to help him, and the fight's on. The Redcaps aren't too much of a challenge. They do have a lot of movement in Castle and Crusades. They have like 100 feet of movement, which is crazy. So they were able to get like right up on top of the battle really quick. There was no rounds really wasted in movement. They fight a little bit there. They're dropping Redcaps, and then out comes Auntie Iron Teeth, the hag. She's an Annis hag, and she comes out. She joins the fray, and then I think her and Pounder square off, and they're going back and forth. She's wearing these long elbow length gloves, which they realize is the skin that was taken from the woman Venda that they found earlier on. So they're like, oh, and she's got these long, sharpened fingernails that are like claws, and she's raking into Pounder and biting him. And she's got iron teeth and trying to bite into him. And she's successful a few times, although she never gets her. The thing with Anasags Castle Crusades, if they get their claw bite in one round, they can get a rend attack. And I came close to that once, but Pounder, I think they get a strength saving throw afterwards. After those attacks, and Pounder being a half ogre, that strength saving throws are his thing. So he was able to push off on that and not have it happen, which was a bummer for me, but great for my buddy Steve and Pounder. So his character Pounder. So the fight's joined. Well, then it changes again, because coming out of the far room which would be to the left, is this figure, this armored figure, and he's wearing ancient armor. And instead of a head, he has a carved pumpkin. And I'll show some close-ups afterwards, but I illustrated this by coming around the corner of our tapestry here with a Halloween mask that I had bought many years ago for this purpose, to illustrate this character, because Auntie Agatha introduces this armored knight as Captain Merrick, which is also a throw to that other campaign that I ran. And those three players are like totally confused, because they thought in the last session of that campaign, they were fighting him, and they're like, well, how is he here? And so I told them, hey, at the end, we'll do a reveal on how this is happening, because there was a lot of behind-the-scenes stuff that they had not connected the dots to in that campaign. So when he comes out, he gives off this aura of fear, because he's a Death Knight. And that really changed the tide of the battle. Like, I was like, this, and they were, I think everybody at the table was like, this is not good, because everybody at the table, everybody in the battle, except for Pounder and Lork, failed their fear test. And they're forced to flee as far as they possibly can. One of the other things, too, that I forgot to mention was in the room where they found Bender, when they were still deciding which way to go, there's another exit. And it led to the hallways, and these hallways are filled with water. And my buddy Matt, who plays Pottery in this session, this was a brilliant idea. They took one of the ogre bodies, because this was after they defeated the ogres, and they were trying to figure out, they had 3 different ways they could go. They were trying to figure which way they wanted to go. They took one of the ogre bodies and threw it and slid it out into this water-filled hallway. And it was out there for a minute, less than a minute, and all of a sudden these giant tentacles came up out of the water, wrapped around it, and sucked it underneath. So they were like, we are not going that way. That way sucks. So that's how they decided to end up taking the cavern route after they'd cleared the ogres. So when the fear went off, what I had them do is they failed their fear save, so they have to flee. Like, unless they're cornered, they have to flee, and they weren't cornered, so they have to flee. What I had them do then was roll a wisdom saving throw, or a wisdom check, And if they passed, they would go through the caverns. If they fail, they'd go through the double doors, which leads into another water-filled tunnel, dark, can't see, there's no light in there. And we had two. We had Pottery went that way. A bunch of the Redcaps went that way because they didn't pass their fear test either. And Faux Fire went that way. And thankfully, Faux Fire didn't get grabbed by a tentacle. Some Redcaps did. And ultimately, Pottery did too. So that's going on. And now Lork and Pounder are left facing this Annis Hag and a Death Knight. And it was a pretty intense battle. I wasn't sure how it was going to end up. They one of the things is the Death Knight draws out this bastard sword, and it's made of like green glass. Looks like I actually showed the players a picture of a Skyrim two-handed sword because that's what inspired me to make it. He pulls that out. They're like, oh great, more. This is not going to be good, and they go back and forth. Pounder actually, at the very end of the fight, towards the end, he actually gets dropped, I think, into the negatives. The claw bite. I didn't get him all at once, but I would get him enough, so it was enough. And he had taken a bunch of injuries before because he doesn't have the greatest armor class. So he gets dropped, and I'm pretty sure he was -6, -6 hit points. So not bleeding out, but in rough shape. And that left Lork to face the Captain Merrick, the Death Knight, and Auntie Iron Teeth, the Hag. He had been squared up with the Death Knight, and they'd been exchanging blows back and forth. One of the things I noted about the Death Knight, outside of its magic ability, which they hadn't really, like the fear effect didn't have an effect on them, the other stuff that they can do wasn't taking effect. So melee-wise, he really wasn't that tough. Like if I had to do that over again, I probably would leave it the way it is. I think it worked out. But like if I was ever to use one in the future, I'd probably do some changes to their melee ability, to more attacks or something to get them a little bit more dangerous in melee. But they're going back and forth. So now it's just Lork standing there facing off, and he ends up dropping the Death Knight. And they do have a dying ability, which I forgot about until afterwards, and then I did bring it in afterwards, and it's different than how traditional AD&D did it. They give off like this cloud of, they don't do the fireball stuff, they give off this dying cloud of stuff, and there's a save involved, which Lork made, so he wasn't affected by it anyway. We did that kind of after the fact because I forgot about it. So that's going on. The Death Knight drops, and that leaves just the Annis Hag. She sees that. She's like, I'm out of here. She goes to run away, but she doesn't take any precautions when she's running away. So that gives Lork a free attack on her. And because of the way she did it, she actually lowered her AC, which that's the only reason he hit her. He hits her, final blow actually kills her. I was trying to, I was like, oh, it'd be a great reoccurring villain, get her away. And nope, Lork hacks her down as she turns to run. So that was the end of the battle. We did a little thing with I was joking with the players because they were like, oh, well, Pounder would he even be able to make that save because he was down and out. I don't know technically by the rules if he'd be able to make a save or not. So I ruled that when he fell backwards into the pool behind him and was basically submerged and risking drowning, but not affected by the Death Knight's cloud. So everybody seemed pretty happy with that. I was happy with that ruling too. We got a laugh out of it. And they fish him out. And the rest of the party at that time, though, some of them had continued to make their saves, actually made their fear saves, and were coming back. Like Jorg and Tuklan were coming back. Pottery, my friend Matt's character, he actually got caught by a tentacle and was in the dark trying to, fight off this tentacle. And he was actually able to make a successful save to escape. And he ended up, I don't know if he went all the way back. He ended up out front at the entranceway, him and Faux Fire. And then Unax, who was back there. And they eventually, I didn't belabor the point. We just got him back up here into the battle. So they learned a couple things. One, they grabbed, some treasure. Lork took the Death Knight's sword, which actually turns out to be a giant bane sword. And it has a history. I think it's called Noroth Dagnir, and it's tied into our setting, but it was built by the dwarves many, many centuries ago, and given to an elf king to fight off a giant invasion that were invading their lands. So there's some history behind that blade. It's not just, I like to do that with magic items, makes them even more special, because I don't tend to give out, I try not to give out tons of them, and just enough to keep everybody happy and keep the game interesting. They did find a couple other magic items, though. They found a wand of bark skin and braces of defense. So Patri, being a druid, he took the wand, and Tuclan took the braces of defense, braces of armor. I'm not sure which one they're called in Castle and Crusades, but he took those. And then they returned. They brought Venda back to Arden and had her put up with like one of the local temples and stuff. They're basically going to take care of her because she'll never be able to take care of herself. And Fullfire returned to the Feywild with the white stag of his king Oberon. So that was good. Above board, so the Captain Merrick thing won't mean a lot to probably you guys, but it meant a lot to my 3 players because the whole time in my other campaign, they thought they were pursuing this Captain Merrick, and it was a totally different person. Captain Merrick was another side quest, and the hag was tied into some of the stuff that they had done, but they had never met her. In that game, there was a point in that game where 6 girls in the town, when they turned 13, started to change into hags, and they fled into the swamp. A NPC that was in that game went out and hunted down 3 of them and killed 3 of the girls before they could fully change. The other 3 he never caught. She was one of the 3, although the Annis hag prevented her from changing and just started harvesting her for different parts. And they don't know where the other 2 girls are. And this would be 50 years ago in my setting when that happened. So they don't know where those 2 girls are. Probably. Maybe someday they'll see him. Who knows? In some campaign. I don't know. So that was kind of neat. We got to do that. And it was a good session. It was good to have my son back at the table after being away for a while. And looking forward to him being a regular this summer. But yeah, so real quick. This video goes too long. Give you a look at the board. It's all, oops, as I kicked the thing. This is all Dwarven Forge. I painted these guys up. These are from Games Workshop. Maybe I'll do a close-up video. I haven't done a video on miniatures for the campaign in a while, so maybe I'll do that. I had these cages. One of my followers, my friend from overseas, Andy, printed these up for me. Printed up a bunch of those. They were great. I painted them. They work great on those Games Workshop trees. Got a little bit of LED stuff going on there. This portal actually was the first time I got to use it. That was really neat. Guys like that. I thought it was really cool. She was actually going to run back to that portal because that portal led to the Feywild. And, but she didn't make it. Lork chopped her down before she could get there. And there's a tree with some more hanging cages. Really cool. But maybe I'll do a close-up video afterwards so you guys get a better look. But yeah, that was a session. They did report back to the chieftain about this in the portal, and he was going to send dwarves to try to seal this room off because they don't want that just unfettered access to their plane. So that's stuff that can happen behind the scenes. But yeah, so that was the session. Really good one. We got another one coming up this month where the other group that was tied up from the previous session, we're going to play out the rest of that and see how that fares. So I appreciate you all watching, and I'll catch you at the next one.